Annie hit the ground hard, her cheek scraping against the splintered porch plank of Gallow's general store. The boot that shoved her still hovered midair, as if proud of its work. "Damn woman," growled Elmer Price, town deputy and professional drunk. "Still think this is your land? Huh? Still think your man's name means something?" She didn't answer. The blood in her mouth kept the words in. A few folk laughed, not because it was funny, but because nobody dared stop it. Laughter was safer than silence. She pushed herself up with shaking arms, eyes never leaving the cracked boards beneath her palms. Her dress, once white, now the color of old smoke, hung off her shoulder, ripped. Elmer spit beside her, close enough she flinched. "I hear Creed's cattle roamed onto your patch again. Maybe he's just waiting for you to die in that shack." She stood. The laughter stopped. Her left eye was already swelling. Her lip bled, but Annie Rourke stood tall. And then she walked, past Elmer, past the onlookers, past the swinging saloon doors that creaked even in still air. No one stopped her. No one offered a hand. Across the dusty street, atop a tall black gelding, Silas Creed watched it all. He didn't move, didn't blink. The brim of his black hat cast a long shadow across his face, hiding the scar that split his temple like a lightning bolt. The silver at his beard's edge shimmered like frost under the morning sun. An old dog barked. A gust kicked dust into the air. Creed turned his horse without a word and rode off, trailing silence in his wake. Back at the edge of town, Annie limped down the dirt trail toward the broken fence that marked her dead husband's land, half swallowed now by the wild. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the gate. The house stood like a forgotten tooth, its roof sagging, one shutter clapping in the wind. She paused, looked back once at the town. No one followed. No one ever did. Inside, the house was quiet save for the creak of old boards and the groan of wind through the chimney. She lit the stove. With a handkerchief, she dabbed her lip, then threw the cloth into the fire. It hissed as the blood sizzled. From the window, she could see Creed's cattle again, two of them grazing just over the ridge. His brand marked them, SC, burned into flesh like truth. She didn't hate him. Not yet. But she didn't trust him either. She watched until the cattle disappeared into the brush. Then she sat, hands folded, eyes dry. A knock came at sundown. She didn't rise, didn't speak. The door opened anyway, and there stood Creed, hat in hand, face unreadable. He said just one thing. "Marry me." "You're not serious," Annie said flatly, her hand still resting on the table's edge. Creed didn't blink. "I am." They sat in silence, firelight flickering across the walls of her cabin, casting their shadows tall and bent like ghosts of older lives. The stew in her bowl had gone cold. "You think you can buy me like one of your bulls?" Her voice cracked. "Because you saw what they did? That makes this your business now." Creed looked at her with those cold eyes of his, like iron in winter. "I don't want your thanks," he said. "And I ain't looking for a wife to warm my bed." "Then why?" He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper, placed it on the table between them. "A deed. Signed. To the Rourke land," he said. "Untouched. Fenced. And safe." Annie stared at it. She didn't reach. Outside, the wind dragged grit across the windows. Something howled in the distance. Could have been a coyote. Could have been a drunk. She stood, chair scraping backward. Her breath came short and sharp. "Why me?" Creed stood too, slower. He held her gaze. "Because you're still standing," he said. "And folks like that deserve more than just bruises and bad looks." The wedding happened 2 days later, in the chapel with a broken steeple. No guests, no music, just the preacher, his Bible, and the wind whistling through cracked glass. By the next morning, Gallow's edge was burning with talk. Old Creed done lost his mind. Married that Rourke girl like she was royalty. Maybe he's feeling guilty about her man. The saloon stank of whiskey and gossip. Someone tossed out a theory about Annie poisoning the old rancher. Someone else laughed. Then they all got quiet when the piano stopped mid-note. Creed had walked in. Annie followed behind, plain dress, boots still dusty. He paid for a bottle, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to his wife. The room didn't breathe. They drank, together, then walked out like it meant nothing. Life on the ranch was quiet. Annie kept her distance. Creed respected it. He rose before dawn, rode out before the sun cleared the hills, and came back smelling of sweat, horse, and sage. He didn't touch her, barely spoke more than a few words each day. But food appeared warm on the table. A new lock showed up on the door. A dog began sleeping outside the house each night. One of his strays, she guessed. And then one evening, when the sun dipped blood red, she saw him return with a rifle she didn't recognize. Long-barreled, polished. Government issue. She watched him hide it behind the old barn wall. He didn't know she'd seen. And she didn't ask. Not yet. The riders came with the storm. 5 of them. Dust-caked. Armed like cavalry, but meaner. They didn't tie their horses outside the saloon. They rode them through the doors. Chairs scraped. A man coughed and fled. One rider leaned over, plucked a cigar from the bartender's lips, lit it, and spoke like he owned the air. "Looking for Ghost Goes by Elias Gray," he said. "He's got a limp, gray in his beard, and a dead eye that don't blink." No one answered. A bottle fell off a shelf and shattered. Annie heard about it an hour later. She was trading eggs for sugar when Clara, the baker's wife, whispered the story with trembling lips. "Bounty hunters," Clara hissed, "said they got papers from the governor of New Mexico. Real official." Annie's fingers froze on the sack of flour. Her horse ran harder than it had in weeks. Back at the ranch, the clouds boiled low and angry. The wind howled like it remembered war. She found Creed at the edge of the field, watching the sky. "They're here for you," she said, breath ragged. "You're Elias Gray." He didn't turn. "Should have told me," she snapped. Creed touched the brim of his hat. "Didn't figure you needed more ghosts." She stepped closer, voice sharp. "What did you do?" His jaw flexed. "Followed orders," till the orders turned sour. "Burned villages I never saw on a map. Killed men for the word traitor scrawled on paper by drunks with stars on their collars." He turned then. His eye, the gray one, met hers. "I left that name in the desert. Buried it with good men." Annie's hand trembled at her side. She didn't speak. Not for a long moment. Then, "They're coming at dawn." He nodded. She stepped back, then pointed toward the barn. "You've got one gun hidden. That's not enough." A flicker passed across his face, surprise. "I've seen worse," she said. "I stayed in Gallow's edge." A crack of thunder split the air. The wind picked up grit and hurled it across the plain. In the distance, the riders lit campfires. 5 flickering flames just beyond the rise, waiting for morning. Annie turned toward the house. "I'll boil coffee. You check the fence line. We're not going anywhere." Creed watched her go, and for the first time in 20 years, the ghost of Elias Gray smiled. The first shot split the dawn. A flash behind the chicken coop, then a shout, rough, panicked, followed by gunfire cracking through the dry morning air. Creed dropped to one knee behind the water trough, shotgun braced over the rim, eyes sharp despite the years. Annie crouched beside the barn wall, her husband's old Derringer clutched tight, knuckles white. Hooves thundered. Dust rose. The bounty hunters came fast. No warning, no honor. Just guns and grit. Creed fired once. The lead rider flipped backward, hit the dirt hard, didn't move. Annie fired too. Her bullet hit the leg of a second man, sent him screaming into the fence post. She didn't blink. Cocked the hammer again. Creed moved like the war never left him. He rolled, fired again. Another man fell, clutching his gut, blood soaking the dry soil like spilled ink. The 4th bounty hunter slid behind a wagon, returned fire. Splinters ripped through the barn door inches from Annie's face. She ducked. Creed stood. His coat flared as he stepped into open ground. "You boys were looking for Elias Gray," he called, voice like gravel dragged across steel. "Congratulations." Another shot. Missed. Creed didn't. The 4th dropped. Only one remained. The last man, the youngest, hesitated, looked at the bodies, looked at Creed, then turned his horse and bolted toward the hills. Annie rose from behind the barn, smoke rising from her little pistol. Her breath came heavy, her dress torn, face streaked with dust and sweat. Silence settled. The ranch smelled of smoke and blood, the kind of silence that hangs after the truth has been told. Creed lowered his shotgun, looked at Annie. She met his gaze. Then the townsfolk came. They rode in too late, a few curious, most just hoping to pick over what was left. They slowed at the edge of the property, eyes wide. Bodies in the dust. Annie standing tall, gun still in her hand. Creed beside her, bleeding from his arm, but still upright. Clara whispered something to her husband. Elmer Price muttered a curse and turned away. No one dared cross the fence. Not anymore. That night, Annie stitched Creed's arm in silence. The lantern light danced on the wall. She tied the final knot with steady fingers. "You could have left," Creed murmured. "I did," she said, "just not in the way they expected." He looked at her. She leaned back, hands in her lap. "They'll tell stories," she said. "Let 'em," he replied. Outside, the wind blew soft across the plains. The blood was drying. The dust had settled, and in Gallow's Edge, folks no longer whispered about the widow who got beat. They spoke of the woman who stood her ground, and the outlaw who stood with her.